Thank you for joining us for another opportunity of fellowship with This Is My Story, testimonies that move the soul. Many of you know for the past 4 weeks, we've been tackling the study guide, the first ever of its kind for our church. And we're delighted that here on this platform, we have an opportunity to engage and dig in a little bit deeper for an understanding of social justice within the Word of God. And so we look forward to that. If you have any questions, let me know. Go ahead, Uncle Calvin.
I'll read you this message from the president. In Ukraine, we have 784 Seventh-day Adventist churches with 43,307 members. And Sharon has sent this to you, Deborah.
Yes.
In Russia, we have 451 Seventh-day Adventist churches and around 31,500 members. Let's pray for our dear brothers and sisters in both countries. They need our prayers and support so that actually we have more Adventist churches in Ukraine, that little country, than all of Russia. Wow. That's amazing.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is hard to believe.
Wow. And Dr. Rock, you spent time in Russia. You had a number of individuals who came to receive services, if I recall correctly, medical services that they needed at Loma Linda, and you had some personal experiences. Am I correct?
Correct. And I'll tell you more about that next time.
There you go. We'll catch it
at the next lull. But that's exciting, and that's a good story. I'll be glad to share it later.
Very good, because I recall I have pictures. Kind regards. See you soon. And
thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Aunt Sharon. All righty. So, Tim, are you on? He has not come on. We're not certain what's going on. And I know his cousin sent a little note in the chat. I'm not sure she made connections, but this is what I'd like to do. We'll see if he gets on. There are some situations that have occurred within, whether it be schools, whether it be churches, whether it be the community, amongst individuals that have left perhaps a sour note, a sour taste, made you wonder, how in the world did that happen? And could it possibly be that we have had what may be considered racism in the church? Do you think there's such a thing?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. You said that without any hesitation.
Well, people are people.
People are people first.
Right.
People are people even before they are Christians.
Absolutely.
People first. And so let me give you an opportunity. If you have a situation that where you experienced that within the church or one of the schools or something, because I know 3 of you on here have shared some circumstances that have occurred where it really left a sour note. If you don't mind sharing that or putting that in the chat. And before I share what it is that I understand, I want to give you an opportunity to share. If there's something, and I see Denise, I'll get to you. If there's something that you know of firsthand, or if you yourself experienced it, or you have a relative or someone within our church that you know of, or our schools, you didn't get in because you didn't carve the tooth correctly. I remember that one. The tooth was not carved correctly, and so one of our fine schools was holding up the entrance, and a meeting had to be called. I'll tackle that in a minute, but please share with us those things, and we're going to try to flesh that out. And then don't forget your questions, and I'll arrange for Dr. Rock. I believe we'll try to see if he can join us for the next Sabbath, 1 week for the Sabbath before we get into our schedule. So Denise, welcome. We prayed for you earlier today. I hope that you're doing much better. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Thank you. I can always take more prayer. Thank you. My comment was, when I first came into the church, I decided to go around to the different churches, Adventist churches, to see how the different cultures, the difference in the cultures of the churches, different churches. So I decided to go to a church in Grand Terrace. And when I got there, the ushers were asking me, giving me directions to other churches, like, I think you come to the wrong one. I think you're looking for these, and they gave me directions to other churches. So that was the only church that did that, though, because I did continue to experience the other cultures.
So, okay, let me just get this right. I think what I heard you say is that you went to a church in Grand Terrace. We got that right so far?
Yeah.
And that church, when you arrived, indicated to you that maybe you were looking for another church and give you directions to go to another church, perhaps because that was closer to your youth?
They just thought I had,
Got lost?
yes, got lost.
Okay, very interesting.
That's-
Very interesting. And
Yes.
I think I'm gonna add to that because I know a little bit of something about a church in Grand Terrace. In fact, you and I just had a conversation. The architect who worked on the church in Grand Terrace you shared with me is the same architect who worked on a church in Corona,
Right.
which, get this, folks, is the same architect who's responsible for Oakwood.
Church.
They all have similarities. And so you have any thoughts on that?
No.
Okay. Denise, what was your response? I'm curious.
I was kind of, for a moment, I was taken back. And then I had to remember for a second that I was brought up by my dad, and I'm always respectful no matter what.
Right,
And
right.
so I was like, no, I'm this is where I want to go. I'm okay. I didn't really know what to say. It caught me off guard. I just continued, and it's like, no, I kind of just let it go, went on in.
Okay.
I didn't
And
really
you were
address it.
relatively new Seventh-day Adventist at the time, trying
Right.
to determine what was your preference in terms of worship experience. All right.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna put a pin in that one and come back to that. We got that one. I see the hand of Winthrop.
Charlene and Winthrop.
Okay, so let's go. I don't know who was first. Did you say Charlene? Us?
I believe she,
You want me to go?
Go ahead, yes.
I'm Charlene Young, but for many, many years, people knew me with my last name Hutchinson because I was married to Joseph Hutchinson. To give you a little background of myself, I grew up in Los Angeles. Like last night, they said like LA proper, Western and Jefferson. That was where our home was. I belonged to Berean. I went to LA Union School. I do remember going to Linwood Academy camp meeting where they would have it there. And I was a very young child, and my aunt Geraldine Roan had a tent, and we got to stay there at night. I just remember it being very cold. And I went to play with some children. They were playing jump rope or something, and they didn't want me to play with them. And so then I came back home, and they said, what do you, and I told them what they had said. I don't remember the words that they said. I just remember the family getting very quiet. They were white girls and stuff, and they were just very quiet. They didn't really tell me that I was being, rejected because of racism. I didn't understand that till much later. But for me, with the way that I look, I've experienced racism on both sides. I'm not this enough and I'm not Black enough. I went to LA Union, and there was one particular thing that happened to me. And I was in 4th grade, and they were doing this little step thing. And then I got booted off, not because I couldn't get steps, but I realized, decades later, is because I didn't look like the rest of them. And so, and I find myself, I don't always go in, and I'm not so friendly with people because even going to a different place when I was down in Florida and saying something to one of the Jamaicans, it's just like, why is she speaking to me? And I'm not really accepted as looking African American enough to be accepted just to step right in and, get in the conversation. It's just like always giving me a sideways look. So I don't just put myself in there. So I feel that, yes, I've gotten it on both sides rather than someone getting to know me. So that's been my experience.
And cuz, tell us your ethnicity. I know you're African American, but you're also mixed. So give us a
Yeah.
little bit of background
Okay.
on that.
My mother and father went to public school, and she would hang around with, a whole lot of kids in Los Angeles. And my father is Korean, but I never really knew. And you think about me being born in the 50s, his family didn't accept me at all. I never even met them. It was just like, I didn't even exist. So I have no background from those relatives. Anything that I have sought out has been on my own to find out what that is. And now I'm finding out things because of ancestry. Now I know the different things, and on my mother's and father's marriage license, I can see who's my grandmother and my grandfather's name because he had to list them, but I had no contact with them. And I was up north visiting another relative who's my senior, and she, through all of these years, and she's the Hutchinson side, well, actually the Rogers side, she goes, "You're African American?" Because I took her my mother's what's the program from the when she passed. She goes, "Oh, you look like your mother." My mother looks very much African American, but she goes, "But I have my mother's features." She goes, "You are African American." Then when I would tell her different things that I'd have to do as a child, and she goes, "You really are." I go, "Yeah, that's what I grew up. I don't know anything else. I don't know anything else." Yes. And people say, "Well, do you eat grits?" Yes, I like grits and cornbread and all of that other stuff. I didn't grow up with Asian food or, traditional kimchi and things like that. So, yes. So being accepted, now looking back, I can realize why I didn't have certain friends, because they didn't like me.
Very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. We'll have to comment on that too. That's very interesting. Dr. Winthrop, is that who that is, Lori?
Yes, it is, Debbie.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Winthrop.
Good afternoon. I had experiences, two different experiences, one overseas as a missionary, and that was eye-opening to be in a foreign country, not know your way around, and to be treated a certain way. The white missionaries were prejudiced. You know what I'm trying to say?
Prejudice.
Thank you. Against us, yes. And I didn't think anything of it because the fellow said he used to teach the students and he would stick his head in while I was teaching them. And that was it. I was really enjoying my room. I didn't know that it used to be his room. It had an organ in it. And so I would play the organ during song service. My students and I would sing. And I didn't know it, but he was quite jealous of that. And he had begun to tell them different things about me, that he told them that my pronunciation would not be the same and to expect that.
Wow.
And then the students began to ask me, where do I keep my tail?
Oh, wow. Wow.
Like,
oh, wow.
So I had to address a few things, and I just kind of asked the students, where are you getting this information? And they were not shy at all to tell me it was him. It was him. So we took it back to the American leader, because we had an American leader and a Korean leader. That's where I was, in Seoul, Korea.
Okay.
And the American leader then wanted to sit down with them and talk with them. And they apologized. It was so sad. they apologized, and I had a very hard time with that class, and because we weren't bonding, and I was bonding on my first classes, and I just couldn't understand. This one was just so quiet,
Mhm.
and it didn't seem like they were learning right away, And I thought my pronunciation was pretty good, but because of the behind the scene thing that was going on, um, um, then it made it difficult for me. And there were some other, I had Armenian roommates, Japanese, Chinese, roommates from America, from London. Everybody was just from everywhere. I got along well with the Armenians, and I just had difficulty with this older white couple
Mhm.
that started this problem. And then when I came back from overseas being a missionary, I went to Andrews.
Hmm.
And I decided after I got my master's that I wanted to do a PhD. And I don't know why, when I announced that I wanted to do a PhD, everyone had to meet with me. So I'm in the room with maybe 6 white gentlemen, and they called a meeting. When they called the meeting and they didn't invite my advisor, my antennas went up, and I called Dr. Rosa Banks, and she told me how to handle it. And so I just went on into the meeting. I later found out that they deliberately did that, knowing that he would be out of town that day.
Interesting.
And
So the people
yeah,
you were with in Korea, were they Seventh-day Adventists?
they were Seventh-day Adventists, and we were all volunteers. There was a new program called Adventist Youth Volunteers, and we got paid, and it was different than student missionary.
I
It
see.
was after you finish school.
Okay,
So
all right, all
yeah,
righty.
it
I
was
appreciate that. Appreciate you sharing that. I
yeah.
know that we've heard some speakers in the past, you may recall Dr. Terry Swinson, who shared the story of being at Linwood Academy. And I know that some of our academies have had interesting incidents occur. And Dr. Swinson shared on this platform, and hope to have him as an up and coming guest before the summer. But he mentioned how he was called to the principal's office, and his dad, who was a physician, had been asked to meet them at the principal's office. And the dad is assuming that Dr. Swinson has done something again, because he wasn't real focused on books at the time, you understand. But clearly that was not it. As they gathered in the principal's office, according to Dr. Swinson, he shares how the principal begins to tell his dad, I called you here today because I knew you would want to know and be able to get this in hand right away. Your son is hanging out with friends, and he's getting very, very close. In fact, we think too close to Negro girls. And the father, as Dr. Swinson relays the story, is dumbfounded. You called me from my medical office to come down to this school to tell me that my son is too close to the Negro girls. Yeah, he's way too close. And we know that you would want to know this so that you can get it handled as soon as possible. And if I'm not mistaken, and some of you may correct me, I think Charmaine probably heard it and a couple of others, but he tells the principal, I'm glad that he's doing that. I think he excuses Dr. Swinson from the room so he can give the president, the principal, a piece of his mind, and says you should hope that I don't sue you. He's doing exactly what we have taught him to do, to befriend everyone. And isn't that what he should do? But it speaks to the mindset of the administration, or specifically the principal, and his interpretation of what a Caucasian young man was doing at that time. And for those of you who know Dr. Swinson personally, you know what eventually took place. He's a beloved friend of LAAA. At that time, there was Linwood Academy, and then there was Los Angeles. I don't know if it was Union Academy or Union at the time, but two separate campuses. And Linwood at one time was predominantly Caucasian, and then little by little, more and more African Americans came in. And I'm sure there's some of you online who attended Linwood and perhaps could even chime in with some of your experiences, but that resonated with me, how this administration had this interpretation. And Dr. Swinson has since wed. He married someone who's actually darker than me. I know her personally. I've known her since I was 6. A whole nother story, but her family credits my grandmother for seeing to it that they had a Christian education. And we were all at the same church in Gardena for a number of years, and consider her to just really be a really warm and nice person. But he married, so evidently he got a good whiff of friendship and stuck with it. But he, Dr. Swinson, couldn't believe what he was hearing. And there are other situations that have occurred, and I know one within our own family. But are there any, before I share that one, are there any other experiences that any of you have had? I know that there were 4 hands at one time. Lori, did I get all the hands?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so
I'll jump.
go ahead. Who is that? I
Um,
don't know who's talking.
I was raised, this is Michael Bain.
Oh,
Sorry.
hey, Michael.
I was raised in Richmond, California, which is where the Black Panther movement started. I moved from Richmond to Sunnyvale, where I was predominantly Black in Richmond. I became the minority in Sunnyvale. The elementary school I went to, grades kindergarten through 6th grade, 2 classes for each grade level, had 3 Blacks in the entire school. Me, my sister, and one other guy who was in the 5th grade. So all of us were in the same grade level in one class.
Wow.
So one of the things I learned, because I was always taught, don't start it, but finish it.
Mm,
Don't start no mess, but you make sure you finish the mess,
come on now.
so it doesn't come back also. So one of the things I learned about white culture, and I'm sure you've heard this through critical race theory and some of the other things, is whiteness has privilege. And many white people will tell you that they didn't do it. They did not have any animosity against you, and don't realize when they say that, that they are benefiting from what others have done on their behalf, which is why African Americans have so much trouble dealing with white people, because you're still benefiting from what the racism that has been done in the past is, even though you don't feel like you're perpetuating it. And many of them have not learned what racism is. So they don't know why they do what they do. You know, racism is something that is taught. It's not something that you inherit. It is learned, a learned response. So when they say, you know, do you have a tail? They're really curious, because that's what they have heard and has been purported to them when they say different things about Black people. And the fear that they have is because they don't know us. And because they don't know, they feel threatened by what comes from us, which is why we always have to defend ourselves. But we have been taught to defend the only way that we know how to defend, which is to protect ourselves from what has come against us. So I got in lots of fights when I was in elementary school, and lots of fights when I was even in college, when I moved to Loma Linda, white Adventism. Because Loma Linda, many of the Adventists who are here believe that they have a superiority over other cultures. Now recognize Adventism was birthed in America, which is white male dominated. And the entire culture that it was birthed under still had that mentality, even though Christianity purports Christian values. So you have to understand these people are fighting back and forth with themselves, with what they believe, with what they've learned. You know, we have learned a dual citizenship as African-American Christians. We know how to speak the language of our fairer brethren and how to associate with them in their arena, but we also know how to speak our own language when we're with our own people. So there's a dual citizenship that we have learned. And part of what has been tough for us is learning patience with these people who usurp the opportunities available to them, but don't feel like they are putting us down by doing it. They don't recognize that by saying certain things, it is derogatory and demeaning and evokes a certain feelings. That's why, and I got in many fights because people would call me the N-word to my face. But in their culture, they expect you to say something back. Yeah. And if they don't put their hands on you, they don't understand why you put your hands on them. So I got in many fights because somebody would say to me, well, you're a stupid N, and I'd hit him in the mouth. And I say, you know, this is what I heard you say to me, that you want me to hit you in the mouth. So every time you say that, this is the response you're going to get from me. And so the two cultures have to learn how to work together. It's so interesting watching this fight because they don't really understand, and having to try to educate them is not what people want to do, but don't realize that they don't know any other way.
It's interesting that you say that, Michael. I appreciate your response because I went to LAAA Academy first and second grade, and then my experience led me to South Bay Junior Academy, which was predominantly Caucasian. And I never forget when I was called the N-word in fourth grade, who was another minority, not Spanish, but Hawaiian. And I was offended, and I made the mistake of sharing it with my grandmother, who was at the school before they opened the very next morning, and demanded that the child be dealt with. But fast forward to a campus here, right here, and I just call the name Loma Linda. Probably been about 5 or 6 years now. I received 3 calls in less than about 18 hours. They had associated me with the Black Caucus. Used to be an officer here with the Black Caucus in the regional fellowship. There was a young man, I believe it was 6th or 7th grade, and he was being taunted, teased, and harassed by what I call was a little thuggish gang, wannabe gang on campus. They were all Asians. They were taking their music cases, their instrument cases, and hitting him upside the head. And he was a little bit on the chubby side, and they would tease him and say, hey, what you gonna have for lunch? You gonna go to Kentucky Fried Chicken? Are you the colonel? And make fun of him in terms of chicken, and hey, are you gonna be Popeye today? And his parents complained, and they addressed the principal, and they documented and wrote some letters and so forth. And this boy began to have some serious emotional problems. So by the time it came to me, I was incensed. I really was. I could not believe what I was hearing. And I recall something just came over me. I got dressed after leaving Grayson Center, Michael, and put on a suit and whatnot, and marched my little happy self over to Loma Linda Academy and demanded to speak to the principal, who the principal for the junior high unfortunately had passed, and there was a fill-in. But they said, no, you should probably speak to the headmaster because the principal has not handled this matter. It has been the headmaster. And I had a one-on-one with that headmaster, and he and I went at it. And I told him, I said, you know, when you are talking to students and making decisions on this little happy campus of yours, you are representing Christ first. This is a Seventh-day Adventist school. I thought that that meant you're supposed to be different. What you have demonstrated in your actions with this situation is that you're not Seventh-day Adventist. You're not upholding what is supposed to be an extension of our beliefs. You're upholding your beliefs, and that makes this an unbelievable situation that's eligible for a lawsuit. So I've given the name and number of an attorney so that the family can reach out and seek legal counsel, and I've contacted the Pacific Union. And long story short, he began to weep. He pulled a chair up in front of me, looked right into my eyes and said, "Can I be honest with you?" And me and my little crazy self, I said, "Oh, you haven't been all this time? Well, please do become honest." And he said, "I've had a problem with racism my whole life, and I've been serving, and I need your help. I need your help." And Michael, this is what really got me. You're an educator. You've been in the system. He told me that he had served as a member of the WASP committee. Did I say that right, Michael? The WASP committee? The people that go and audit the schools in terms of whether their credentials are in
Okay.
place and this, that, and the other. He had been a member of the WASP, and he told me to my face, he had intentionally made up stories about a name. If I were to call the name, you all would know immediately. Some of you would know, and you'd be like, "What?" And he said, "I need forgiveness." I said, "Well, you don't need to be asking me. You need to deal with this family. You need to deal with these people. And what about all these other people? Why haven't you dealt with this?" And so I guess I say that it's one thing to have you tell us that you were called the N-word. I was called the N-word 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. It's one thing for that, but 5 years ago, 6 years ago, what in the world and why in the world is that still happening? And we still have the responses that we have from those who are in administration, who when they get caught, now all of a sudden they have feelings of remorse. I struggle with that. That's the first thing. The second thing was I had to intervene, didn't have to, but I called in, solicited the help of administrators from Pacific Union on behalf of an African-American student who came to me with a problem of racism on Loma Linda University's campus 5 years ago. And it was not a pretty picture at all. It was ugly, downright ugly. And if it were to go public, it would be embarrassing, downright embarrassing. But the man, once I approached him, he had a similar response. "Oh, I'm sorry. And I didn't know." Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You had to have known. You're here in the School of Medicine. Don't tell me you didn't know. So I struggle with the interpretation of something in terms of a public persona versus what's happening behind closed doors, one-on-one. Did I say that where it makes any sense to anybody? Does it make sense to you?
Oh, yeah.
I'm struggling with that, Michael. And anybody else that's out there, y'all pray for me that you don't hear about the news. Tell me about racism in the workplace, and what you may have experienced. I'm wondering, have we improved? And Michael, while you're again with your remarks, and I see you, whoever's getting ready to talk.
Hey,
Who said, "Hey"? Is that Tim? Tim?
Larry McGee.
Okay. Hi, Mr. McGee. Hold that thought real quick. Another thing I struggle with is that the perception of us in so many ways is adopted from the media. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, some of it.
So much of what people think and hear is shaped by what the media has given, what the television does, and that doesn't define who I am. That doesn't define how I carry myself. Hey, and all this, that's just not even me. I get disgusted, and it's frustrating to me. In Orange County, we used to live in Anaheim Hills, go to the small church in Santa Ana, Good Samaritan, where I met Jerry, who's my Sabbath school teacher. I'm like Mr. Whoever said it earlier, Judge Greg Mathis. You can't find a billboard, you can't find liquor stores, you can't find fast food. That does not exist. You go to Newport Beach, it's not there. It's not in certain parts. Or like Judge Mathis said, it's not in Beverly Hills. But in some of our neighborhoods, it's flooded. You got a liquor store on every other corner. You've got the alcohol signs and billboards. You've got the tobacco billboards. You've got the advertisements in our periodicals like the Ebony magazine, and I don't know if they still do the Jet. I just feel like we've sold out. We've been sold out over and over again, and better days after a while. I'm looking forward. Mr. McGee, go ahead.
Mr. McGee, unmute yourself, please, if you're talking.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I went to school, Glendale Academy in the 50s. So right off the bat, you can kind of see what was going on there. They wouldn't allow Black folks in town after dark.
Stop. Are you serious?
Yeah, that was the law. That was the law in the books.
Oh my. Okay.
It's always kind of bothered me that the church would locate its offices, you know, the conference offices or the headquarters in these most conservative communities, you know, as far away from the urban areas as possible. And I always, you know, kind of wondered about that. But going to school in Glendale at that time, when I graduated, La Sierra wanted me to come and enroll there. And I had enough of white people and racism that I did not go. And that was the end of my Adventist education. It's only by the grace of God that I'm still here, but that's my story.
Wow. Did you become bitter?
No, I don't think I became bitter. I think I just became realistic about what was going on, and I didn't want to expose myself to any more of that kind of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really want to go to Oakwood at the time because didn't know anybody else that had gone there. It was too far away. So I went elsewhere.
Understood. What would you advise a young African-American who is in a multicultural setting where they may be one of few in a workplace?
You have to be true to yourself. I think in the past, a lot of us have thought that we had to assimilate as much as possible and become as close to the culture, the white culture, as we could. But I don't think that's the answer. I think just be yourself. Don't be vindictive. Don't be angry. Just be kind, be wary, and do the best you can.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for those remarks. It's good to have you on, Mr. McGee.
Thank you.
Anybody
Debbie.
else? Okay.
Yeah, Debbie, this is Viola. Is it okay?
Hey, hi, Viola.
Hi. So, to be honest, I don't have any expectations of being treated any differently because I had an experience as a young woman growing up in Central America. Some missionaries from this country, white Caucasians, came down to teach at the school and to, I guess, give us some culture and, just elevate us somewhat. But then they didn't want their children to socialize too much with us. I remember this one particular family, their son, the oldest son, was beginning to get too close to one of my sisters. And the mother, the parents just didn't like that. So they sent him back to the United States. They sent him back so that he wouldn't socialize with us or get too close. And the mother even went this far as to, they had a little post office on campus. She went to the post office and told the clerk that was working there that if any letter should come to that post office from her son to my sister, to confiscate it and give it to her, the mother. And yes, and the girl told us. So from that experience, I said, well, these are Seventh-day Adventist missionaries that come to teach love. And if this is how they're going to make a difference between us and them, why should I expect any different from the people that are outside, that are not Seventh-day Adventists? So to be honest, I don't have any expectations. I'm just being realistic.
Wow.
This is my experience.
Wow. Thanks for sharing.
I
Debbie, this
just
is
have
Cheryl.
something quick to say about the spirituality and quote unquote white Adventism that totally blew my mind. When I was up in Andrews University, I would sing. I love to sing. And I sang, and I think it was All Nations Church. And as I was exiting the church, a white lady said to me, I can't wait till I get to heaven. I'm coming over to your part to hear you sing. my part. I was like, my part of heaven. So did you all know that we had a part of heaven?
Girl, thank you for informing us. Thank you for informing us. I think that was Dr. Winthrop. Appreciate that. We're going to continue, who's also going to be singing in heaven, and that's Cheryl Bentley. Go ahead, Cheryl. Thank you. And then I'll take Renee, and I don't know who's on the iPhone, but Cheryl, Renee, and whoever's on that iPhone.
Okay, this is Cheryl. I'm really enjoying this. I lived a lot in the white world. Daddy went to Stanford. We were the only ones there. You know what I mean? This is in the 70s. It was a lot of, we went to Loma Linda. I got called the N word. I was in the first grade. And then the children told me I couldn't color on the, you know how they used to put the white paper up on the wall and they made a mural. Yeah. They told me I couldn't color because I didn't know how. And they took the crayon out of my hand and sat me down. And the teacher allowed it. Now I'm 68 years old and I still remember that. You understand what I'm saying? So I tried my best to, keep my children in Christian schools. And Brother McGee, I sent them to Glendale. God help me. And I tried. I had no clue. I thought that, this is 2000. And I found out, 2 weeks ago, that 20 years ago, things happened to my children that they never called my children's father or me on. And it's still beating my children up to the point that if they hadn't gone to Oakwood, praise Jesus for Oakwood, if they had not gone to Oakwood, they probably wouldn't even know they were Black. So they were able to regroup and know that they were normal and okay when they got to Oakwood because of the maltreatment. I don't mean mistreatment, I mean maltreatment at Glendale. And so I had it, and then my children had it. I do not understand white Seventh-day Adventists. I'm sorry. I have to say it like that because they are a different breed of cat. And I've come to the conclusion that they always want to jump up and say, well, we have to be Christ-like. Let me pray for you. No, don't pray for me. No. I want you to take it to Jesus and I want you to change. And they don't. So my kids are still struggling with the church behind that. And it angers me because I did the best I could through their little lives and they still were mistreated. So like Viola said, don't expect too much before Jesus comes because this is the way it's going to be. But we do not have to respond to their foolishness. We do not have to carry it. We can let it go, which is what I'm striving to do, and go forward. The one thing that I have that really burns me about the Ukraine is arrogance. To me, this is an arrogant war. I want what you have, so I'm going to take it. That's the way I see this. And it brings out those feelings that I had before when I was mistreated as to what the Ukrainians are going through. So this is a different war for me because it brings back those feelings. So when I say pray, I'm saying we need to all pray and pray that foolishness out. We need to pray it out of the church. We need to pray it out of the Ukraine. We need to ask the Lord to stand up and show the world who he is. Don't get me started.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Powerful word, Cheryl. And I want to make sure that you know this group right now knows I'm not trying to have a bashing party on a race. I know some wonderful Caucasian people, and you mentioned Oakwood, and Cheryl and anybody else that went to Oakwood during his time. One of my favorite people. My husband would tell you, I still call his name is Coach Roddy. And we know that he was Caucasian and he was a kind individual. He was stern. He handled his business in terms of the court and his craft of teaching and so forth. And has a lovely wife, or had a lovely wife who's still alive. So I don't want it to have that interpretation. There are some wonderful people who are of different races, but it still doesn't negate the fact that our experiences are there with us. They've left scars, they've left pain, they've left some people disillusioned, and they've kept some people from the church. And then we're going to go to Renee after
Yeah,
you.
I like to say that it's not so much bashing. It's the experience that has brought us to the point where we are today.
Yes.
Because without those experiences, we would not be who we are.
Yes.
And I really feel strongly that everyone needs to understand what each of us go through. We've never walked in each other's shoes, but for some reason, God always seems to bring us all together at this point. Think about it. Everyone that's on this podcast are here today at this time in your life. And so if we can learn from one another, or if we can share with one another that we all have experienced things that makes us who we are, then that's a good thing, because hopefully by making us who we are, we still have the love of Jesus Christ in our hearts. Because without that, we would not be who we are. And I can relate to what Cheryl was saying. So important that whoever's listening understand that these are the things that we deal with on a daily basis.
Agreed, and not approved, but agreed. Renee, you're next. So I have Renee, and I don't know who was next, Lori, but I'm gonna look to you to help me out. Renee, go ahead. Good to have you. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have about a couple of incidences. So I attended Santa Monica Junior Academy, which is located in Santa Monica. And I was in the 3rd grade, and it was just like yesterday. I can just see it and I can even feel it. I was in 3rd grade. The incident happened where the teacher, who happened to come from, I believe, Tennessee, out to California to teach, her name was Miss Lee. She wanted me to recite what a paragraph was, and she wanted me to say it exactly how she had said it. Well, I think I recited it, but not the way that she said it. And so as a result of that, I was standing up by her desk. she slapped me across my face.
Oh, wait.
So,
Oh, wait.
know,
I can't.
I went home,
I
I
can't.
I
Oh,
went home,
what?
told my parents.
Wait a minute. Pause for a moment, Renee. We gotta all exhale right about now.
Yeah,
Wait a minute. She slapped you for real across your face.
yep.
Ooh, okay.
And I told my parents, and the next day my father had a meeting. And needless to say, that never happened again. And she only stayed there for that year. The next incident was with the same teacher and the first grade teacher, and her name was Miss Thielander. I was out on the playground and they called me over. And I couldn't have been once again, maybe third grade, maybe second grade. They asked me questions about, did my mother ever call me a pickaninny?
Oh, no.
And I go like, what? I didn't even know what that was. So once again, I went home and told my parents. I don't know exactly what my parents did with that, but that was the environment that I was in. Then I go out to La Sierra Academy. We were in Bible class. I remember Elder Wood. I can say all these things because these people are dead. But in Bible class, he played this bluesy number and he wanted to show why we shouldn't listen to this music. And right away, a white boy held up his hand and said, well, we shouldn't listen to this music because it's a black woman. It reminds me of a black woman singing in a bar. So my thing was, they don't have any white people that sing in bars. Why does it have to be, the negative? You go to the dark side. But then my husband has something he wants to share.
Hey, Mr.
Hey.
Alfonso, how you doing?
How's everybody doing?
We stayed out of trouble. We're gonna try to keep it that way through the rest of this call.
Amen. Listen, my situation is very interesting in that it's interesting in a sense that, I grew up in New York City. I'm from Panama, and growing up in New York, you had your ghettos here and your ghettos there. So the issue of racism wasn't as prevalent in the 60s. So when I graduated from Oakwood, my first job was in Portland, Oregon. Well, first of all, I had to get a map to find out where this place, Portland, Oregon was. And so I get out to Portland, and the situation, I was working for a laboratory, and I was one of three guys that was there from the East Coast. And it was a strange feeling. I could remember going into the restroom to wash my hands and was shocked when I looked up at the mirror and realized I was looking at myself.
Wow.
It was lily white. Now, the thing that really got me was a few years later, I was able to get a job at the Portland Adventist Medical Center up there. By that time, my family is immersed in Portland, and the only place that we had to go to church was one black church in Portland, but it was the only black church in the whole state of Oregon. So that tells you how isolated we were up there. And what was so stifling about that was that I guess they had heard, or the faculty had heard, that a new manager was hired at the hospital. And I could remember going to the cafeteria to get the lunch for the day. And everybody, I can tell you this for fact, everybody, when I walked through those doors to enter the cafeteria to get online, everybody stopped what they were talking about. And all the eyes were turned around, focusing on me.
Sure.
Very, very strange experience.
Mhm.
One thing that I learned up there was that, like my brother-in-law was saying, you have to be very cognizant about your surroundings and how you carry yourself. And you have to be able to rely on that in order to survive, because if not, you will surely fall.
Mhm.
And up there was that situation, those situations where I know my oldest son, you know, he had a broken clavicle or something from somebody slamming him into a wall. And to this day, he doesn't talk about it. And he doesn't want us to listen to him talk about it either. And this was at an Adventist academy. So I'm just saying that, you know, this racism thing, what I've learned is that the Adventist organization, most of their, not most, all of their facilities and or offices or whatever are always created 35 miles out of the city, out of the urban area. So that you have to drive, of course, to get there. But what it does, it continues to foster that sense of isolationism and racism, because they only react to themselves. And most of the people that are hired in these places are coming from rural areas. And when they come to this metropolitan area, this is the first time they have come in contact with Black people. So when we get upset, when they're reacting to us, like, you know, you said, well, this happened, so I'm going to go see the principal. All you're doing is walking into the devil's den, because guess what? The principal grew up down there in Montana someplace. He's never seen a Black person. So, you know, he's going to always talk about how concerned he is and what have you. But the principle is no different to the rest of the people that are creating these atrocities towards us. So I'm just saying we need to be very cognizant of this, because you guys are telling stories that I have never experienced. So I can't, you know, I can't give you a horror story as bad as what you told me, but it's awfully awkward when you walk into a place and every head turns around and look at you. That's something that I'll never forget.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Small. It reminds me, and I'm going to go to Michael and Denise. It reminds me of a situation at the General Conference years ago during the OJ hearings, OJ Simpson. And seemingly, unconsciously, unknowingly, for worship and in the cafeteria, the African Americans were sitting on one side and the Caucasians were sitting on the opposite side. It just was crazy to me. I thought that was ridiculous. When we were at Oakwood, I'm sure Michael remembers, there used to be a thing because we were in school at Oakwood through June. And so the playoffs for NBA were taking place. And Michael probably remembers, you had the West Coast versus the East Coast. And we didn't back down. We were some bad kids in terms of sticking up for our West Coast teams. And of course, Lakers had several wins during that time. And so it got tense sometimes because you got your East Coast over there and West Coast sports fans on the opposite side. And of course, it's all in fun. But when it's in a place that's supposed to be representing your faith, and that's what's taking place, that's a horse of a different color. I tell you, it was something very, very similar. And again, I don't know how it came about, but on the campus of Loma Linda, there were TVs put in certain places so that the outcome of the presidential election could be heard. And I happened to be on that campus when President Obama won. My grandmother passed right after, literally right after he was sworn in. She wanted to see it. She held on long enough to see that. But boy, it was like, it was tense and people were snapping and going on. What's going on with these folks? And it appeared as though they were agitated because he won. And so you could see and feel that there was a problem. Unfortunate, but let's continue. Mike.
will ask this to Denise first, and then I'll come in.
Okay, go ahead, Denise.
Well, what I was gonna just mention was the politics in the church. You know, you have to remember also, because I was trying to find the article while everyone was speaking, but I was unable to, how the whites, Caucasians in the church vote Republican, and the blacks in the church vote Democrat. And I can't find the article, but that's just something I wanted to bring up. Like, it's how serious and deep this is in the church politically, that is how we're divided.
Denise, where did you read that article? Thanks for sharing that.
That's what I was trying to find. I was trying to find it. That's what I was looking for while I was speaking to you. I can't find the location of it because I wanted to read it, some parts of it, but it's been a couple of months since I've read that.
Okay. I know that, and perhaps that's a question for Dr. Rock to pose when he gets together with us. I've said it, and he has agreed in some of our conversations with him earlier, but what does he say? As the political structure is, so goes the church. Whoever is in charge politically, but without a doubt, we have a stronger presence in certain areas. But I'd love to read that article as well, Denise. Thanks for sharing that. And we'll tackle more about that as it pertains to social justice in the church. Let's see, Michael, let's continue.
I was going to say, for the people who have come on who may not understand why we are discussing it, there are a lot of wounds that we have and scars that we have from our past. And sometimes voicing them and recognizing you're not the only one helps you to understand that you are part of a wider culture and something that is not aimed at you, but aimed at us overall. I mean, as I was listening to the stories, the young lady said that her teacher slapped her, reminded me of my wife, who, when she was in elementary school, I think it was like 2nd or 3rd grade, she and another girl got in it and they were tussling and fighting, and the teacher broke them up and slapped them both across the face, Val and a white girl. And then she turned to Val and told her, "Stop crying. Your skin is not as sensitive as hers, so you don't have any reason to be crying." And, you know, she remembered that her entire life. It was a mark that was made on her by a teacher who unknowingly said something that was racist, but did not recognize it. I mean, all the way up till just a couple of, not too many years, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I'm playing in Loma Linda Gym, and there was a guy who we had found out who worked in the Drayson Center, I'll call it out. And when he worked there, he tended to make remarks that showed his belief. And there was a bunch of guys, and he thought that we were trying to usurp his rules. And so we were like, "No, we did everything the way that you said to do." And he goes, no, you guys, you all always try to change things. And we were standing there, and it was like, well, wait a minute, who is you all? And what was funny was there was a white guy who was with us, who played with us all the time. And he turned around, he said, "Wait a minute, am I one of you all?" And, you know, it kind of diffused the situation because then everybody was laughing. But the truth is, that's what people believe. They have a belief and they act on it. And I don't think what people really understand is this thing is a lot deeper than American racism. Racism, white and black, is racist all across the world. The darker Asian hues are considered lower class than the lighter Asian hues. And the devil has planted this way, way, way back in our history, which continues today. One of the things that I think we recognize from the president who came after the president who looked like me, when that guy was in office, he ended up bringing out the fact that racism and bias, racial bias, is still alive in America today and thriving. And that there's a difference in America. He showed us how fast things can degrade to two systems, the upper class and the lower class, you know, the dark and the light. And I think it's funny because I don't know if you guys recognize this in Black history, and then I'll close this. We are resilient. African-American people are resilient. When they said that we couldn't, we achieved anyway. And when they put a token in to just let us look like we were achieving, we ran with that. And when I say ran with that, I'm talking about all of sports now is basically Black and becoming more and more Black. And not only did we run with that, we ran with every opportunity that we've been given. You think about what our forefathers went through to provide the opportunity for us. And what scares me is I don't think our kids have the same resolve that we have when we said, I can't afford to not do what is important because it reflects on my parents.
That's right.
And I don't want to discredit their name because of the sacrifices they have made for me. I owe them, I have an obligation to my name to make something of myself. And, you know, as parents, because partly we're responsible because we created them. And, you know, we gave that they had because we wanted them to have more than we. But I would have us hate white people forever. And the devil would have white people hate us forever. And that's why a lot of what Martin Luther King said resonated, because it was Christian virtue. It said, you can't overcome evil with evil. Love begets evil. And even when injustice is served against us and we have to be patient, it's hard. I remember when I used to get in a lot of fights, my principal called me in one time and I told her, well, he flipped me off, so I hit him, or he did this or that. And she said to me, why is it that you have to correct everyone? Why do you feel it's your responsibility to correct them? And I thought, I was thinking I'm just standing up for myself, but then I realized she's right. And as Christian virtue talks about how Christ is patient with us, we certainly aren't patient. And patience does not mean that you make yourself a stepping stool and allow others to step on you. It might mean that you plan and that you try a few things before you do certain other things. But it means that you have to be understanding and forgiving. Just as Christ's sake, he has forgiven you, we need to be patient and forgiving of others.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much because again, we've got some real wonderful people in our lives like Daryl and Daniel and their family members who have been very, very kind to us that represent, that are a part of the Caucasian race. And so by no means am I labeling everybody and assuming that this identifies and characterizes everybody any more than what they've seen in terms of a rapper identifies and characterizes us. Two more incidents I want to share with you, and then I've got a couple of questions for my husband as we begin to wrap it up. I recall Linda Pinnock sharing a story when she was teaching here in Southeastern California Conference at one of our schools, how someone walked by and made a comment, "Oh, Linda, is that you? I could not tell the difference between you and the blackboard." That's just plain out of order. And it's those type of things that are so very, very hurtful. Or the incident that some of you may recall, which actually involves my younger sister, my baby sister, who was a student at La Sierra, again in Bible class. I heard someone else mention about a Bible class earlier. They were watching, the Bible teacher had brought in the TV to watch the results of one of the hearings, and I believe it was the Rodney King hearing, and stated after the verdict was read, he got what he got, he deserved what he got because he was Black. And some of you know my baby sister. She's a militant, and I guess to a certain extent, that's what has been a staple within our family, taking a stand for justice. We can go all the way back, Dr. Rock mentioned, to his grandfather and there are different ones that have done different things. And I guess in some ways we are activists because we have participated in different things. My sister walked out, and I never will forget, she noticed another African-American young lady still sitting there. And she said, "What are you doing still sitting here? They just insulted us. We got to get out of here," and walked out. And that teacher was removed from their position by Friday because, you know, my mother took a stand. She went down to the school, and by that evening, there was a meeting at Kansas Avenue, and over 300 individuals came together, unified in purpose to hold the school accountable along with this teacher for what it was that he had done. And so I'm wondering, are we still holding individuals accountable? Do we still have the fervor and the passion of the Black Panther Party? Do we still understand the need and the purpose for UNCF and the historical Black colleges and universities who received bomb threats at over 30 of their campuses just this month? Do we understand that the incident that took place, I think that was about a week or so ago, where the young man was in an altercation, Caucasian young man was in the altercation with the Black boy, and the Black boy slammed down to the floor and handcuffed at the white school, and the white boy
Was
is put on a bench. Exactly. And he said, hey, why didn't you handcuff me? I was fighting too. In fact, I started it. So why aren't you handcuffing me? And that just happened. I think CNN or MSNBC was sharing that. And so all these things are taking place. We see and we have heard of redlining in terms of banking and financial institutions. That's real talk. You live in a certain geographical area or region, there are different rates from insurance to health insurance, car insurance, health insurance, and how you're going to be charged in terms of monthly payment. And that is absolutely positively real talk. It shouldn't be like that, I would think, but it absolutely is. And there are still places where you and I cannot go. Clubs, country clubs. There's one country club in particular where we've been to last year. Jerry and I walked into a country club. We were invited there for a dinner with an organization. And we looked up, and I'm doing just like this, nudging, because I'm like Mr. McGee, Mr. Small. All eyes were clearly on us. We were the only two spots in there. And all on the walls were individuals of a different hue. And they looked at us like, what are you doing here? Why and how did you get in here? Who did you pass to get in here? And we were guests of the organization. It's almost like you have to flash. My husband is a retired chief. Sometimes I ask him when we're going to certain places, can you go get your badge? Because if something goes down, I just want to flash the badge. Hey, he's one of you all. Just to have an extra layer of protection, because people are visual first. They're visual first and they act upon what they see, and then they deal with the fallout of that, whatever that may be. And so I struggle sometimes with that. You, and I'll take two more comments and then we'll close. Two more comments from our guests. You, on the other hand, are a son of the South. And we heard one of our earlier guests reference that earlier this month when we had retired NFL player Jim Tolbert, who graciously gave of his time and shared as a son of the South as well some of the things that he experienced having gone in the NFL, into the NFL, but he went to go play in Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. But he heralded from the South. Now, your life is interesting because you're down there. Your brother knew one of the girls. I heard him say recently that was bombed, that was in the church when it was bombed. He recalled your older brother, some of the dynamics that were there and the tension that was there. I have to tell you, guess that Jerry took me back there in 2017 to show me where he lived and where he grew up. And oh Lord, can I tell you how sobering it is to see the backwoods of Alabama and to see how African Americans were pushed aside and the areas that they had to deal with, and no regard, just no regard, and the things that they had to deal with. My heart broke as I listened to some of the older individuals who were there. And one of the popular groups that you used to listen to, Practice, what's the name of the group?
Oh, the Delta Air.
The Delta Airs, you would hear them practice. But you, while you are a son of Alabama, you were born there, you didn't stay there because your older brother asked you if you wanted to come stay with him, which lifted you out of Alabama and kept you from being a part of what would have truly been a militant presence, because I know good and well your mouth wouldn't have been quiet. You would have been out there with the Black Panthers. And I don't know that you would have been lined up with Martin Luther King too well, because you may not have had the patience that he had to do what he did. But tell me how seeing some of that in the South impacted you when you came to Orange County to live with your brother.
Well, I think one of the things that was very interesting was the fact that I was very much aware of my surroundings, and I knew and had a sense of what was really going on.
Okay.
However, I think because of the education that I received on the West Coast versus the South at the time, I was better equipped to be able to understand the social issues that were going on in the South. But I'd like to just kind of quickly say,
okay,
and that is, I was very fortunate to be hired as the first African-American on the Anaheim Fire Department in 1974. Now, with that, I knew I was dealing with a lot of racism, prejudice, but I also knew that in order for me to be successful, I had to make sure that I didn't allow my temper to overcome me trying to beat the system. And I'll share one story with you, for example. After being on the department, once being hired, you have 12 months of probation.
Okay.
At 12 months, you can be fired for just laughing at anyone. That was sort of the authority and the control that they had in that particular arena. So 12 months, I finished my probation. And then I decided, I said, you know, I'd like to go ahead and start studying for my engineer. The engineer is the individual who drives the fire truck, code red, and he's the one that pumps the water.
Yes, yes.
When they get at a fire. And make a long story short, I passed my certification, but I had to study on my own because no one would help me.
Okay.
No one would take the time to, every once in a while, an individual would take the time and answer questions that I had. But what I ended up doing is when they were upstairs sleeping at night on the apparatus floor where the engine and the trucks were kept, I'd be down there by myself underneath the fire trucks, learning all the different gauges and valves and things of that nature that I needed to understand. Well, I got certified. And one day, the battalion chief called me in the office. He says, Austin, I said, yes, sir. He said, I want you to go and I want you to be acting engineer. You have your certification? I said, oh, yes. I was so excited. I mean, I was extremely excited. And on my way to the station, I'm thinking, okay, if I get a fire, how many gallons of water am I gonna be pumping? What's my friction loss? And I'm adding all this stuff up in my head because that's what engineers do. And I get to the station, and of course, I walk in and I say hi to the guys. They look at me and they say, Austin, what are you doing here? I say, hey, I'm acting engineer today. And so I went, put my gear away, went back on the apparatus floor. I talked to the captain who was there, and I told him that I was their acting engineer. And he said, okay. And so I pulled the fire truck out on the apron, which is right in front of the fire station. And then I started doing my checkout like engineers normally should do to get ready for the shift. And so the new captain comes out And he looks at me, he says, Austin, can I talk to you for a second? I said, sure. And he said, I got a situation and I got a problem. And I said, okay, what can I do to help? He says, well, the guys in the station will not get on the fire truck if you're driving. I said, what? He said, the guys won't get on the fire truck if you're driving. And I kind of pondered that for quite a while before I really responded. And I got to thinking about it. And I said, well, this is a paramilitary structure. If I go in that office and get on the phone and call the chief, I know all hell will break loose. And I said, do I want that? Or I can tell him to go suck an egg. And then, of course, he could write me up for being insubordinate. But I began to think about it. And I said, you know what? There's only one thing that I really care about. And I went to the captain. I said, hey, Cap, I said, do I still get my 5% upgrade pay? He looked, he said, oh, yeah. I said, okay. I said, you can put whoever you want in the front seat to drive. And see, at the time, we didn't have automatics. We had stick shifts. So I said to myself, well, if there's an accident or if something happens, it's not my fault. It's the captain who basically was in charge. He's the one that's going to end up, facing the chief who has sent me out there to drive. So I didn't get a chance to drive, but I did get my 5% upgrade pay. So I just like to say this, fast forward 10 years later, I would say close to about 15. Now I'm the same rank. I'm a captain now as the captain who told me when I was a rookie that I couldn't drive the truck. He's my counterpart at the same station. I'm the truck captain and he's the engine captain. He asked me, he says, Jerry, do you have a second? I said, sure. He walked outside back of the station. He said, Jerry, he says, something's been eating at me for the last 15 years. I said, well, what's that? He said, remember the day when I refused to allow you to drive because I was persuaded by those guys, the rest of the guys in the station, they persuaded me to not let you drive. I said, oh, I'll never forget it as long as I live. I said, I'll never forget that. He said, I just want to know, will you please forgive me?
Wow.
He says, I was wrong in what I did. I shouldn't have never listened to those guys. And I said, absolutely, I will forgive you. But you know what? I forgave him, but I never forgot. And so there's a lot of stories like that in my autobiography that I wrote that I think you will see there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I completed my autobiography, and this is a picture of it. And basically it is Paper Tears is the name of it. It's my autobiography of retired Fire Chief Jerry D. Austin Sr. This book has a lot of good stuff in this because it lets you know how God had a plan for my life. And he made sure that that plan was followed through. And every person, white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, every person who came into contact with me, that was a reason for them to be able to do that. I have been helped by everyone, no matter what their ethnicity was. They are the ones who helped me to propel to the level that God had for me in the career that I had. And this book basically talks about that. It talks about coming from the South, being raised by an older brother, going into a career, being successful, holding every position in the fire service, understanding the importance of hiring, diversity, understanding that not only is that important, but being able to help those who don't know exactly what needs to be done, because you know as well as I do, there are a lot of individuals that can do that job. And I just wanted to say that racism is going to be with us. It's what we do to combat it. And also it's so good that everyone's sharing their story, because by you sharing your story, what that is basically doing, it's helping all of us to understand that we all are going to have to deal with pain. We all are going to have to deal with adversity. We all are going to have to deal with people that are racist. We all are going to have to deal with people that are prejudiced. It's how we handle that, how we deal with it is going to make the difference. And I want to thank my mom, my family, everyone who worked with me over the years, is because of their tenacity. That's what helped me to maintain the positiveness in my life to be successful. And believe me, there are some low points, and then there are some high points. But I do know this, it was God who blessed me and helped me to achieve things. That's what I want to say. And if anyone is interested in this paper tiers, you can go on operationreachbackfire.com. Once again, operationreachbackfire.com. 10% of the sale of the book is going to Operation Reachback, LA chapter. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you just
Profound,
did a little,
Gary, profound, beautifully articulated. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You are welcome.
Hi, Sister Hiana Cho. I want to extend to you our
Hello.
sincere condolences. I know your mom has passed. Some of you may recall that Sister Hiana Cho was on earlier in the week, earlier in the month, and shared with us that her mom had just turned 106. 106. But regrettably, we have to announce that her mom has passed there in Barbados. And so we want to be mindful. Many of us know Sister Hiana Cho. She was the administrative assistant for Dr. Calvin B. Rock there on the campus of Oakwood College, now Oakwood University. And so heartfelt virtual hugs, Sister Hiana Cho, for your
Thank you.
presence
God bless
today.
you. Appreciate it. God bless you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So racism, I know you experienced some racism as well, and you get nuggets of that in the book, and we've heard some of the stories today, and even in the Bible where there are indiscretions that make you wonder. The Good Samaritan, and how there were those who walked past him and had problems with who he was. But the beauty of it is when our hearts are in the right place, when we link up with God and we surrender ourselves to him, he walks with us, he guides us, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit shields us, I believe. And so we each have memories. I know each of you could probably share some things you remember, but I'm grateful that you have survived.
Yeah.
We're survivors.
Can I say one more thing to the viewers? To give you an example of what I had to go through. When I was interviewed by the fire chief, there's two questions I want to throw out. They really cannot ask that today. One for me was, if someone called you a nigger, what would you do? That was the question I had on my chief's oral interview. Second question was, you know, we have a lot of Mormons on this department. Do you have a problem with Mormons? That was one of the other questions that I was asked. Now I was 19 years old, going on 20. So to answer the first question, I said to the chief, sir, I wouldn't do anything because I'm not a nigger. And if anyone calls me a nigger, they're the ones with the problem, not me. That was my response. The second response was, I said, sir, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I would know a Mormon when I see one, and I don't think he would know a Seventh-day Adventist if he sees one. That was my answer to the second question. So like I said, they can never ask that type of question today, but those were the questions that I received going into the fire service back in the early 70s.
We can only hope, as you said, that they can't ask those questions now, that they have had growth in other areas as well. And truly we've seen that because one of your mentees is now chief of the fire department in Riverside.
Yes.
And there have been others. And you have now, under the umbrella of Operation Reachback, successfully had over 38 that have now been hired. 45, I stand corrected, 38 perhaps in California, adding Las Vegas to it now, 45 who have now been, who are minorities and successfully hired as a result of the program, where you intentionally are grooming and preparing men and women for a career in the fire department. And so these are some of the things that are game changers for what we are working with as society now. And while this was not something we planned to do today, perhaps it was cleansing to be able to share. Is there anybody else with one or two final comments before we have our closing prayer and conclude our time together? Anybody else?
Debbie, this
Yes,
is Viola again.
yes.
The program did not go as planned initially, but it's going just how God wanted it to go.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. And Denise, I got your link. Thank you so much. Would you put that in the chat? Why do white Christians vote Republican and Black Christians vote Democrat? It's had over 22,000 views thus far. And very, very interesting, very interesting. So thank you for sharing that. Any other remarks? And Viola, thank you. Appreciate
We
your,
have iPhone, Debbie. iPhone has their hand raised.
thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciated the conversation. My question is, I don't know if you want to call it rhetorical or not, but as I'm sure everyone is aware, we all believe that our kids should receive Christian education. And it's my understanding from listening to the conversation today that people believe that there's racism within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I would go so far as to say, based upon the conversation today, it sounds to me like people believe that there's institutional racism in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So my question or thought is this: if your child under the age of 18, school age, is going to be sent to a Seventh-day Adventist school where they can experience racism, what's best? To send them to the Seventh-day Adventist school where they will experience racism, where they may or may not receive a Christian education, or send them to a public school where they will not receive a Christian education, but they won't be exposed to the same level of potential racism as they would receive in the Seventh-day Adventist Christian school, so-called.
Okay, that's, tell me your name, please, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your response.
Tell me your name, please.
Oh, this is Daryl White.
Daryl White. Okay, hey. Thanks for your question. I appreciate that. You must want us to be on this call about another hour because you know you have stirred up a hornet's nest.
Yes, because Michael Main raised his hand.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Michael handle that. But I will say that perhaps I'm the one that started it in terms of me identifying the church, institutions in the church. I could have said in the workplace, as I pointed out with my husband, we identified the fire station and the neighborhood, and I did reference redlining in terms of banks and financial institutions. I could have identified some other institutions. So let me take responsibility for having called out institutions within the church. I say that to say I don't know that in fact, I don't believe it would have been different had I been speaking about another religion or even another community. I don't believe it would have been different. And on what basis do I say that? My mother played for a non-SDA church for over 23 years. I had a chance to go to their general conferences and sit in on their district meetings and so forth. And when my mother began her other business doing robes, I traveled with her, and from Kojic to Progressive Baptist to AME, African Methodist Episcopalian, so forth. I had a front row seat to how they do business, and in fact, have sat in some of their offices, administrative offices of some high-ranking individuals within their ranks, and be able to dialogue with them. I think it's a human response first. I don't know that it's single to us. It's just that we happen to be Seventh-day Adventists in a predominantly Seventh-day Adventist community, even though everybody is not Seventh-day Adventist. So let me take responsibility for that. But I believe I could step aside, and Michael, I'm coming to you, and identify a neighborhood and outline and share observations. For instance, when someone was speaking earlier about the president just before this last one, I remember as soon as the inauguration was done, I saw in one of their neighborhoods a big, huge sign that covered most of the building. And it was very clear. And I quote, I took a picture of it because I wanted to remember it and share it. It said, "Trump won, get over it. They still have one-way tickets out of the US." And that message was very clear. I could have called out racism in other areas, but perhaps for this afternoon session, this is where I felt led to go. But I thank you for your question, Daryl. Let's hear Michael's response. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, Daryl, I have a unique perspective. I went to church school 1st through 3rd grade, and then I went to public school 4th through 9th grade. Then I went to church school 10th grade and public school 11th grade and private school 12th grade. So I've been back and forth in both systems. I will tell you, one of them at least purports virtue and states about Christian ethics. Even though they are not perfect, and even though they make a lot of mistakes and don't do things as they should, it's to a lesser degree that you have certain things happening. In public school, it was not, how do I want to say this? In private school, things happened, but it was more covert because they did not believe it to be what should have been the norm. Whereas in public school, it is accepted as a norm and it is okay. So sexual promiscuity is not something that was frowned upon in public school, and doing activities on Friday nights and drinking was just the norm, and smoking and doing a bunch of things was the norm. That was not the norm in private school. And so even though it was not perfect, there were more restrictions, there was more opportunity for the kids to find Christ in a Christian environment, because there were people who were there who were true Christians. I can honestly say at every church school that I went to, there were people that were there that were truly loving and kind and giving and purported true Christian values. Even though they weren't, the whole campus wasn't like that, there was enough that you could find it. And I'm not just saying that to say, I'd sent my kids to private school. You know, I homeschooled, my wife homeschooled first and then sent them to private school. And I sacrificed because I know if you seek him, he will honor your work and your desire to try to find him and bless and prosper. So there is a difference. I will give one last personal testimony. I played football and I loved football, and I excelled in football in Pop Warner and in high school. And then my sophomore year, I was going to play varsity, but varsity played on Friday nights, and I knew I had to make a decision. And the school gave me such grief that, you know, that my teammates were saying things like, "What's wrong with you?" And the coach, the varsity coach would not go after a player, but the JV coach called my house and was telling me, you know, he'll talk to my priest for me or my pastor, anything to get me to play. And I told him, they don't make the decision for me. I make the decision, but I've made a stand. And they made it so hard because all of their activities were on Friday night. All of the dances, all of the dinners, all of the socials, everything was on Friday night. So it made it very hard to participate and be social in their environment. Whereas church school, the activities were aimed more at me being inclusive and being involved and us doing things at other churches and things of that nature. So it at least pointed you in the right direction, even though everybody who was there was not saved.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's it.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. Any other one final comment? Daryl, did that kind of get some
something
insight?
as well.
All right, John Pierre.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Happy Sabbath, everybody.
Happy Sabbath.
All right. Praise the Lord. I was just over here, and it's good to see your uncle. God will not be able to speak to him. Praise the Lord. I just wanted to say that I'll say on the other hand, when I went to Seventh-day Adventist Christian schools, you know, it was a couple of times I thought I could have seen this and that racing, but you know, I was trying to stand up against it. And I'll say myself, I was, you know, a little bit at times on a couple of, you know, on the white guy, this and that, kind of tough on more than one instance. So I'm gonna say, you know, and I don't feel too good about it. I don't know if that was, you know, rightly directed. So I'm not gonna put all the blame on them. Sometimes too, it can be due to what, you know, what you feel is going on. But there was at times too, you know what I mean, with teachers and students, you know, and I asked the Lord for getting sorry. So I still feel that environment as I left and went to a public school, because you can run into the same thing, you know, as there's other different temptations. Public school gain different things that you can run into even amongst blacks. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying to you is I still feel as I you know, later on in years, that still could be the best education, because I still know some things from learning that, you know, sorry to say others, that, you know, speaking and education. So I feel that can be, as I think his name Michael was saying, that you know what I mean, the different things, it's not good, but still the overall thing, and, you know, the environment and Christ centered, and still where you can even speak on it. It's not as far as being, you know, Christ-like. My father coming to school one time, Glendale Academy, with his Bible one time, to deal with a situation where you can be heard. You know what I mean? And so I still feel that it's to the best. I feel it's the best Christian education. If any time you can get it, the education part, because you know how you see with other schools, you can't even, you know, how they talk about the, you know, when certain areas, how they're not compared with they was busing people out of, you know, certain areas. I know in LA and Watts to different predominantly white schools. So that education, if you can get it, I'm not gonna say I think it's good. I think it's good.
Wonderful.
Praise the Lord. That's Christian education. Christian
Come on
education.
now.
Seventh-day Adventist Christian education.
Mr. Thomas, you know what? I just have to pause and say, it is such a delight to have you speak up. I leaned over to Jerry and I said, that's Pierre.
Amen. Praise the Lord.
I was like,
Amen.
get out, that's Pierre. And we're seeing you, and this platform has prayed for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank
And
you. Yeah.
I just need to
God
point
answer.
out to everybody that's still on, this is Dr. Thomas' son, Pierre Thomas, and he's a genius in the making. I'm excited to see what God is going to do for you. But I had to just acknowledge that, folks, though all of us who have been praying, what we see before us is an answer to prayer.
Amen.
And of course, we continue to be prayerful as God shapes and orders your steps toward where he wants you to do, and fast track you to what he has in store. But I am honored that you have joined us today, Pierre, and give hugs to your mom for us, Dr. Thomas. We love her dearly and love you, and we appreciate the fact that you've joined us this afternoon. So Viola and team, that's an answer to prayer. Go ahead, Pierre.
Well, no, I like the way your husband mentioned reacting to it. That, you know, when I was, as you mentioned in prison, they said not so much what happens, but how you respond to it. And I remember my godfather, I just say this one thing, Uncle Elder James Malone, some people could know, he passed away, my godfather. He said one time he wrote something, he said one time he went to a job interview, and as soon as he walked in, he said, the guy said, well, what's going on, boy? He said, if he would have responded, he wouldn't be where he is today. So that's why I say, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, Elder James Dogger says, so he can make exalt you in due time. So hopefully I get that same.
Oh, he's already doing it. He's already preparing for you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And we continue to keep you in prayer, Pierre. We know that God is not finished yet. He's not finished.
Amen.
Not finished. Jerry, people have asked where to buy the book, and thank you for your support of Jerry.
I put the link in
Yeah,
the chat.
Lori put it in there. I see she's done that. OperationReachbackFire.com. OperationReachbackFire.com. And kudos to
If anyone wants a copy of the book, go ahead and fill out the information at the bottom of the website, their name. I need your name, your address, and your email and phone number, and I will mail you out a book. The cost with mailing, shipping and handling will be $35. So I'll send that information, and then you can pay it based on Zelle, Cash App, or credit card, or just a check.
But if you're in the area, just put in the chat that you want it, and we'll arrange for you in this area and go from there. We don't want to get into too much more because it's a donation where parts of it go back to Operation Reachback. And know that Operation Reachback has a mission that's single to African-American young men.
That's right.
Who are perhaps one of the threatened individuals, funds directed toward grooming and preparing them to take their rightful place in society. Yeah. Well, we've spent some good time together. We appreciate the fellowship. We've heard some words of wisdom.
Yes.
We've heard some stories that ruffle our feathers.
Yes.
We've heard some pain that's still there for some, and for others who no longer feel it but haven't forgotten.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, it goes back to one word, perhaps two: God's grace.
Amen.
That sustains us and helps us to weather the storms and to walk boldly in the confidence and the assurance that God equips us where he takes us. And so we have to lean in and hold on to that. Let's see. No problem, friend. I think we're done. What we're going to do is close out with prayer. The sun is preparing to set here. Thank you so much for staying by. I never heard a word from Mr. Williams. His cousin sent a note to us, and we just pray that everything is okay with him. But as Viola mentioned, it went the way that it should. If you have any questions for Dr. Rock, please get those to me, and we'll get that scheduled in the next week or two, and we'll get out a notice of the upcoming presentations that are coming up. We have some exciting ones that are coming. We'll get that out, and you'll be able to see that at a glance. I want to give a shout out to our co-host today, Lori Crawford, coming to us from Maryland. I really appreciate it, Lori, for your work and your willingness to assist, and each one of you that helped make it what it is. And I might as well say a co-host to Michael too. Michael jumped in and helped me with Judge Mathis, and always so willing to serve. And so I appreciate that, as well as Viola and each one of you that have been committed. Shall we end with prayer? Husband, would you mind? Is that all right if I ask you to pray?
Let us pray. Father in heaven, the awesome you are, the more we see your hand is still on all of us. Father, we know that there are so many things going on, especially the war. Please help those people, help the Adventists, all of them, get through this without any harm or danger. Father, thank you for allowing my wife to be able to put on this podcast so that others can learn. We all had things to say today, and we know that if it wasn't for you, none of us would be here. So we want to thank you for allowing us to be able to share with others the feelings that we have. Hope that those that were listening understand us a little bit better. Father, we once again want to thank you for allowing us to be able to, an opportunity to see Pierre. And Lord, we just thank you for blessing him and keeping him whole to this day. And as we ask that you keep a hedge around all of us until we meet again, In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you for joining us once again. It has been so nice to have this time of fellowship with you. May the Lord bless and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you and grant you and yours peace. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. For more information about this program, This Is My Story, Testimonies That Move the Soul, see us at our website. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.